All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Leading in a New Reality. I'm Elizabeth Fitzsimons, Vice President of Leadership and Engagement at LEAD San Diego, which is an affiliate of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. At LEAD, it's our mission to connect, educate, and empower leaders for positive change. And we do that through professional and leadership development, board matching, and working with local nonprofits on projects that serve the community. This webinar is produced by LEAD in partnership with Jones, a company whose mission is to develop leaders and human systems that counter oppression through diversity, inclusion, and organizational effectiveness. This webinar is meant to help you understand what's happening in our ever-changing world and inspire and empower you as leaders of teams and leaders of families. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed by our friends at ABC 10 News. Thank you, 10 News. We'll take questions from our viewers, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you're tuning in on Zoom. And we'll also take questions on Facebook. Just leave a comment and we'll pick it up there. Thank you. My colleague and program manager, Kim Wynn, is here with us today, and she'll be looking for your questions and comments. So today's topic is mental health. Today's world is a scary and uncertain place, and the pandemic, social injustice, distance learning, working from home, and the recent election, all of that has been creating a lot, right? Depression, anxiety, exhaustion, overwhelm in our everyday lives. So what are some ways we can cope with all of that extra pressure? And how do we as leaders of teams and leaders of families help the people who are depending on us? It's our goal for you today to leave this program feeling informed and empowered. I'm so grateful to our guests for joining us today. Briana Boyd is a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice in San Diego, where she uses a social justice framework to treat all of her patients and is committed to cultivating love and justice in the community. Before practicing full-time, Dr. Boyd worked at the Veterans Medical Research Foundation, where she developed and administered innovative psychotherapy interventions for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. She is also an adjunct faculty member at San Diego State University, where she teaches graduate courses on multicultural trauma and crisis intervention, as well as undergrad courses on stress management in the counseling and school psychology department. Welcome, Briana Boyd.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tina Casola is a behavioral health specialist in emergency services, experienced in working with individuals in distress as the result of witnessing and experiencing a variety of traumas. An advocate for progressive behavioral health practices with emergency responders, Ms. Casola and the staff of First Alarm Wellness provide education to individuals, departments, businesses, and other organizations desiring a better understanding of PTS and emotional distress. She responds to critical incidents and consults with agencies to produce effective response strategies before and during events, with a focus on supporting the most important asset, which is their people. Welcome to Tina Casola.
Hi, everybody.
Tami Hester Johnson is a program specialist, district counselor, and military liaison for the Cajon Valley Union School District in San Diego's East County. Ms. Johnson began her career working with students on probation and parole in a day treatment setting, and has continued working to ensure that all students can achieve their best possible self. She also serves as an adjunct instructor at Point Loma Nazarene University and teaches graduate level courses. Formerly, she has worked as a high school teacher, elementary and middle school counselor, supervisor, and university academic advisor. Welcome, Tami Johnson.
Good to be here.
Thank you all for being with us today. So, all right, I'd like to get started with an overall high-level status check. What's happening in the community in our country. And from a mental health perspective, where are we right now? What are you seeing out there? And what are you experiencing yourselves? And if we could start with Dr. Boyd, that would be great. Dr. Boyd?
That's a great question. It's been quite a year like no other. So I sort of think about how like no human alive today has been through these experiences that we're experiencing now together. in the past year, there's been a lot of ebb and flow, sort of a lot of attention, and then a lot of kind of the tension pops, and then there's more tension that builds and it kind of pops. And my patients are up and down and all around like the rest of us. What's different is that typically I'm not up and down and all around with them, right? Usually I'm pretty steadfast and I'm, you know, kind of grounded in my very predictable life. And now I'm kind of in this unpredictable up and down tension, swelling, popping sort of process with everybody else. You know, going to the supermarket, not being able to find toilet paper. Am I going to kill my mom if I go say hi? And then holding space for other people who are like, I think I'm going to kill my mom if I go say hi. So it's just been a lot to be a provider in this time. And the community is okay and not okay, and okay and not okay. And we sort of reach a new normal, and then we reach a new level of fear, and we reach a new normal and a new level of fear and uncertainty. And so that's what it's been looking like kind of on the ground in my private practice and in my personal life, and the students as well.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. How about you, Tina?
Oh man, the first thing that comes to my mind is exhausted. You know, as a professional, as a mom, as a friend, yeah, I'm exhausted. I'm an extrovert and I miss people. This is all great, but I miss people. I miss hugging people. I miss, you know, going out. I miss walking around and being able to look down because I can see below a mask that's there and I'm not tripping on stairs. And yeah, so just like Dr. Boyd was saying, this up and down and not knowing, I feel like it's kind of walking on a waterbed. You know, wake up every morning and you think, okay, you know, is it gonna be kind of steady and firm, or am I gonna step down and go, whoa, you know? And then, you know, trying to help and walk with people through that as well. It can be hard.
Thank you, Tina. How about you, Tami? What are you seeing?
Thank you. What a great question, and a difficult question. When our schools closed back in March, it really shook education to its core, I think. And that moment of pivot needed to happen, and not being locked in fear to be able to provide for students and families. And I will say, just in a few days, the district that I work with was able to do that. But I can also relate to Tina with the feeling of exhaustion, and Dr. Boyd, this feeling of, you know, emotional up and downs, highs and lows, never knowing when you needed to pivot or change, but also being hope for families, being that constant in families' lives. And I think when you work in education, families often turn, you know, we're that thermostat, if you will, like, is everything going to be okay? And I felt that pressure. And personally, I was certainly not prepared for a pandemic. We were that family. You know, we weren't paying attention to how much toilet paper was in the house or where the groceries were, and the shock when I went into Trader Joe's and literally everything was off the shelf. And so I can relate to that feeling of panic and anxiety, but also the feeling of certainly being able to be hopeful in a time that we've never seen before in my career or lifetime.
Well, as providers, you all mentioned, you know, you're going through this yourselves as well, and you're living this with them, with the people that you're caring for. So how does that change your approach and how you're caring for people? Tami, do you want to continue on?
Well, I think just understanding that in our work, we just couldn't let fear dominate us, you know, and through the lens of school counseling and education, I think we're having these deep conversations about how we needed to shake education down anyway. You know, I'm sorry that it took a pandemic, but to be able to look at education and thoughtfully address the needs of each student and not just stick in a standardized format, that gave me so much hope. And being able to tell families, we didn't shut down. Maybe the doors of the buildings needed to close for a while, but we did not shut down. And I think that gave families hope, and it gave families that feeling of calm when lots of things were in chaos. And I hope that really came across, at least with the care we were trying to provide our families.
Tina, walking on that waterbed,
Yeah.
how has that changed how you're approaching the people that you're providing care to?
Well, I think, you know, most of the work that we do working with the first responder community as much as we do. And then I have a background working with the Red Cross and disaster services as well. So I think I've always kind of been minded towards being, proactive and, trying to plan things out. And, this is one that we can't plan for. There's models that are similar, but there's a lot of differences too. We don't know what the end game is going to be. We don't know even how long it's going to take. I don't think any of us thought that we would still be here 8 months, 9 months out now. Traditional disaster scenarios, we kind of hunker down and we do what we need to do. And we know that help will come from the outside, and that's not true in this one, right? Everybody is involved. There is no cavalry that is coming. And so, traditionally, I think sometimes modern psychotherapy, modern therapy, the group of us that are meeting and talking today, I think a lot of us tend to kind of be on that same level, that idea that, we're humans and we're walking the same walk. It's a little different than a lot of people think back when they think the therapy of the Freudian guy, where they're going to come lay down on my sofa and tell me things. And, so I think the pivot a little bit has just been being very natural and real with clients. And I'm not here as the expert to tell you it's going to be okay or how to even do it. Because I don't know, I'm going to be real and natural, and maybe that's modeling, that distress and not knowing is okay. Maybe that's brainstorming, but, so it's really just being present with people and not having answers, which sometimes it's hard. And in my group, it is. I work with a lot of folks that, see a problem, fix the problem. They're the ones that are to come in and make that assessment and go and do it. And while we can still do that a little bit, there's so many unknowns still. So it's really been just slowing down. And this will sound really funny coming from a therapist, but slowing down and just kind of listening and taking pause and waiting to collect more information. We can't put the cart before the horse. We can't pre-plan too much because we just don't know,
Dr. Boyd?
A similar experience, very much so. I used to kind of imagine before the pandemic, I never thought about it deeply, but now in the pandemic, I think I used to feel like this very steadfast sort of structure on the side of this river of distress flying by me. And I've got like my little golden lasso of love, and I'm like pulling people out of the river, but I'm rooted firmly in the ground. And I'm like, and they're wet and they're tired and they're on the bank. And I'm like, it's going to be okay, And
Right.
that's sort of how I used to work. And now it's like, that ground is gone and I'm in the river.
You're in the river.
At the beginning, I used to think, oh my gosh, I've got to get all these people through the river safely. How am I going to make sure they avoid the dams and the sticks? And then I realized, like, I can't get people through a pandemic safely. I can do a lot of things, but I can't assure that my patients will make it through a pandemic safely. I can't assure that they'll get what they need. And so kind of like Tina was saying, being in the river with everybody else, kind of flowing with it in an authentic way that can still feel very empowered and very much modeling, like truth-telling, checking in with the self-care, and modeling that. For example, I'm taking Thanksgiving to New Year's off. I need a break. I have hit a serious wall. And my patients are like, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I should. And a few patients are like, hey, I need a doctor's note. I need to go too. And so this modeling, this authentic sort of check-in, it's like, it's okay to not be okay. We're here together. I don't know, but this is what I think for now, but that could all change. And just authentically validating their experience by not knowing. Right? Like, well, I've got it all figured out. What's wrong with you in the pandemic that you don't have this figured out? It's like, well, listen, I'm supposed to be the expert and I'm drowning in the water with you. And so I think that authenticity and that self-care, that modeling of that self-care, that permission to have that self-care, the encouragement and recognizing that like, that is the way I can support. We're all in this sort of shifting, I love the waterbed analogy, sort of this shifting space together, and to try to just take care of myself the best I can in that shifting space, and then modeling that and being with them in their uncertainty as well. A lot of honest conversations at this time.
Yeah, and I think that there's real power in just the normalizing it. Just hearing from your therapist, your expert, who is like you typically in this exalted position, right? That, oh, what we're all feeling is totally normal. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not have this figured out and to be struggling, and we're all in this river together. And just, I think there can be some enormous comfort in that.
Yeah. I posted a picture of me one day because, Christmas cards and Facebook and all that, everybody was like, oh, I'm good. And I posted a picture where I was just kind of not good. And it was kind of a challenge to myself a little bit, but the feedback I got from that was terrific, right? There were people saying, yeah, because people look at you and say, well, you're a therapist, you should know. It's like, well, no, I don't. And then one of the things I was hearing people say a lot was like, well, I shouldn't complain. I'm doing okay. I shouldn't complain, or I don't have it. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to say that this is awful, that this sucks, this, all something. I mean, continuing with our water analogies is, we're all in the same storm. We're on different ships.
Right.
And it just kind of depends on everybody's different circumstances. And so yeah, so definitely, giving people an avenue just to talk, and share that, and telling them that it's okay to say, yeah, that this isn't so fun, or even that, yeah, I'm doing okay. I've caught up on Netflix and I've reconnected with my family. I mean, it's all good. There's good and bad and everything. So.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a moment. Kim is going to launch a poll. We're going to poll everyone on Zoom. We can include our Facebook viewers as well, just to check in on how we're all doing. And so every week, the youth minister at our family's church sends out a text to all the teens asking how they're feeling, and to respond with a heart emoji corresponding to the varying levels of well-being. So we've kind of replicated that, but we're not able to use emojis in our polls, unfortunately. But if you could choose one of the responses, and for our viewers on Facebook, you can add your response in the comment. And if you can't see on Facebook what the poll is, the question is, how are you feeling? And with the responses being, I'm doing really great. I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing okay, I guess. I'm starting to struggle, and I'm having a really hard time. It's been really great at monitoring these texts from our youth minister, and just seeing the teens being very honest about how they're doing. And then, that there's conversation afterwards, and maybe phone calls that follow up. So it's been really, really heartening. So while those processes, while those answers come in, we're going to move on. And this question is for Dr. Boyd. And it's really about it's about how the pandemic has disproportionately affected Latino, Indigenous, and African-American communities. And on top of that, with the repeated trauma of, police killings of unarmed Black men and women, and the Black Lives Matter movement bringing attention to the systemic racism in our country. Can you tell us about what you're seeing in your patients who are people of color, and specifically your patients who are African American?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. This is nothing new. This is the best time it's ever been to be Black, trans, gay, Latinx, Native in America. And this is what it looks like. And this is as old as we are, and this is part of who we are and part of what we are. And we're so uncomfortable with these realities that we live in the water every day, that it's hard to talk about. And so this thing has forced the conversation, and because of the circumstance, it is forced, well, I don't know how exactly, but it's sort of forced a listening ear in a way that people were never willing to listen before. Mm-hmm. And so these ways that, disease and illness disproportionately affect our communities, that's always been happening. Diabetes, hypertension, trauma, poverty, lack of education, water, like access to clean water. This is nothing new, right? What's new is the attention that people are willing to sustain on it, right? We might get moments where the people kind of glean it, and then we sort of say, well, those are those bad people. We're not like them, but when Obama was president, we lived in a post-racial society, and that people who were my supporting community members were telling me that I'm kind of extreme because I think that CVS is white supremacist because they don't carry colors for all people in the foundation section. And people are like, gosh, you're so intense. Now people are like, oh, there's white supremacy at CVS. Yeah. And so, for a lot of my African-American patients, I think there's a lot of trauma. A lot of us choose not to watch the public lynchings of Black bodies. But I think a lot of us feel angry at the validation that's now here, right? Angry that like, oh, wow, this is happening. It's like, we've been telling you. Angry that it takes a different group member to tell you that it's true. I remember reading the posts about when George Floyd, the death had just occurred, and people were posting things like, well, this happened to me because I drive around with my Black poodle and the police would pull me over, and people go, no, you're kidding. It's like the presumed innocence of the poodle that's not extended to African Americans. And so when this woman is telling the story of her poodle, we go, oh my gosh, that's racist, right? But Black people have been telling you how we've been disproportionately affected by policing and over policing for centuries, right? But so I think that there's a combination of rage, exhaustion, disgust, excitement, hope, validation. You know, we all know this. African Americans have known this for a very, 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 very long time. And we've been loud about it and it's been ignored. And so for the first time in a long time, or maybe ever, it seems like Black Lives Matter. And that is very hope-filling for or hope-inducing for a lot of my patients, right? A lot of my patients are, you know, they have this interesting paradoxical experience where on the one hand, they're just furious and disgusted. On the other hand, they're hopeful, more hopeful than they've ever been. But this is nothing new. This is really, really old, and that the pressure of the pandemic has kind of revealed the cracks in a more obvious way that cannot be ignored. Where really, if you see this crack and you choose to ignore it, it says something much, much, much more profound about you and the society we're living in. And so, you know, it's nothing new, and it's all very new, and it's an exhausting, long struggle, and we seem to have turned a page, and now we have a vice president that looks like me. I mean, that's incredible, right? Coming off the tail end of you know, Charlottesville and white supremacist movements. And it's just, but I personally, on a personal note, I'm Black, white, biracial. I look Latinx. So I have a very interesting sort of racially ambiguous experience on this planet. And I think it's important for people to really begin to take stock in the truth of the matter, because we can't really fix it if we don't really know where the problems are. And we've been so quick to try to get past this because it makes us so uncomfortable, but it's not working. And so this sort of forces us to really take stock in where we are and who we are and what we are, so that we really can hopefully fix this in a meaningful way, rather than just like, let's throw a Band-Aid, let's do something positive. Let's, you know, this is who and what we are. This is the reality of who and what we are. And we can't fix it if we're not going to square off with that reality.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Tami, what are you seeing in children? I know the kids that you deal with are a little bit on the younger side, but I mean, kids are aware of what's going on. And how are you seeing these social issues manifest in the kids in your care?
Well, I want to start off by saying that a great mentor, colleague, friend of mine, as I was, you know, launching into my career several years ago, we were talking about leadership, and he probably shared some of the most valuable words to me. He said, listen first, speak last. And as a white woman showing up to this table, that is my job right now. Mm-hmm. You can't stop there. When you're listening, you need to believe the stories that are being told to you. Mm-hmm. I believe that that's what we are trying to do. That's what we're adhering to do. And that is our practice. That's what we want. And I think by being able to do that, I can hear the stories. I believe the stories, but if I stop there, that's wasted energy. That's wasted time. I need to have action. And so we are framing up, we are very intentional about social emotional learning. And sometimes that gets glossed over as, oh, you know, it's, you know, mindfulness techniques, but we want real conversations with kids. We want to listen first, speak last, let them tell their stories and believe those stories. And then ask the kids, what is the response to this? My family and I are very open about white privilege. We are very open about it. As a matter of fact, my son, who is now in college, said, I don't think many white people are having the same conversations we're having at the dinner table. And I said, but we must, because the reason, well, I have a lot of passions around that, but one of the things that my children very much understand is because of their privilege, certain things have happened to them, not earned. And I believe that that's strength, because when we know that, we know we can now deal with a system, and we can now deal with an uncomfortable conversation, right? I know how I'm showing up at this table, and I need to listen first, right? Speak last. And it inspired me so much to, well, one conversation with my daughter in particular, she got in the car after school, this was before COVID, and she was very upset. And she said, do you know there is such a thing as red line districts? And I said, yeah, I do. And she really started talking about, in class, they were really looking at San Diego and the oppression that happened even through law and systematic oppression through brown and black people purchasing property. And she said, do you know we live in a red line district? And I said, yes, I do. We actually live in Southeast San Diego. And I said, but I need you to understand the privilege behind that. We chose to live in that red line district because we like the house. That is different than a red line district experience. Mm-hmm. And those are the conversations that we can't be afraid to have. We have to be able to say those things if we want to create an equitable system that all can show up at the table and all are welcome. And until we do that, it puts this pause on something that we have an amazing opportunity right now. Things are surfaced. It's time, right? It is time to have those hard conversations, but put our egos a little bit in the background here, right? And I can only speak from my experience, but that really needs to happen. If it's an uncomfortable conversation, I'm sorry, but it's probably only uncomfortable for someone who looks like me for a minute. Mm-hmm. For a minute, maybe for a little while, maybe for the whole training, maybe for the whole conversation, but we're talking about just a very short amount, a minute in my life versus a lifetime. And I think that those conversations need to happen. So thank you for letting me share that passion out to the group.
Thank you, Tami. Tina, I'd love to hear your perspective.
You know, I think about two things with all of this. One is that, thank goodness, my children are smarter than I am. And there's been a part where I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And slowing down and listening to them and letting them lead me, because my mind, my eyes, my perspective has been influenced through 46 years of living that doesn't see the same things the same way they do. And that provides a lot of hope, you know. Personally, for me, I've learned that I can say I don't know, you know, and that I don't have to be the expert or, you know, and in fact, I'm not, you know, I need to let other people have influence on me, which is hard, you know. That doesn't always make us feel safe. It makes us feel vulnerable. And so being a therapist, you know, I was taught to look at the system, to be a listener, you know, to look for solutions and all that. And, you know, even add COVID on top of all the other changes that we've been experiencing. Again, we just have to slow down, or I've had to slow down and just know that even though I consider myself a well-educated, well-rounded, thoughtful, you know, open person, that I don't know it all. And I can't assume to know that, you know. So instead of being like, oh yeah, I get it, it's okay for me to say, I don't know. Can you tell me? You know, teach me about that because I don't know, you know. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Tina. Kim, can you put up the results of our poll, please? People are doing pretty good. And then kind of, can everybody see that? Yeah. A little bit of I'm doing really great. Most are doing pretty good. Some in the okay, I guess. A little bit more in the I'm starting to struggle, and a few of our folks are having a really hard time. Tina, earlier you talked about how this crisis is so much different because there's no rescuers coming in, right? I mean, the crises that you have experience with, you know, wildfires, earthquakes, big disasters. There's always the first responders and the people who come together to help, right? And with this, there isn't. And how does that affect people and their processing of this crisis?
It's been interesting, you know. I remember early on, you know, March, April, people saying to me, "You must be really busy." And in fact, we weren't that busy. There was definitely in our practice, you know, there was a slowdown. And then in looking at the poll results, you know, I can honestly say in the last 2 to 3 months, that's definitely changed where there's more phone calls of people saying, I don't even know what to do right now. I just know I need to call. I'm at my wit's end. I can't take this anymore. I think that in the beginning, people were hunkered down. You know, we're all good about kind of pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps and we're going to get this figured out. But as time went on, you know, we weren't busy because people don't have private space to do stuff. You know, one of my jokes is that I can't go into my bedroom or my closet or my garage and do therapy for an hour and then walk right back out and make the chicken dinosaurs for everybody and act like, you know, nothing had happened. And so that piece of self-care, even for people that kind of were regularly involved, kind of slowed down for a little bit. In the disaster cycle world, I mean, we could all go online and we can look for things that talk about, you know, what's the traditional kind of cycle of disaster. And there are different models that will walk us through those things. You know, in the beginning, people are kind of shocked and in awe, and then people come together as a community. And, you know, there's stuff that's been written about how even in really dire circumstances, that sense of community and wellness and togetherness is strong. But that as time goes on, even though conditions may improve, people's mental health starts to suffer. And we're kind of in that phase. We're in this, and I would guess that we're in this disillusionment phase that's kind of lasting. We're not moving through because now we're stuck. We're waiting. You know, we went through the honeymoon phase where we were all in this together and we hung up signs and, you know, we took packages to the little old lady down the street and Lysoled them before we handed them to her. And then we got into this kind of, you know, here we are, we're all just kind of trying to survive. And that's wearing. It's wearing. And it's hard because it's not a high peak, right? It's not the disaster. And it's not so bad that, you know, it seems dire on the day-to-day level, but that consistency, that fact that it just happens, like Groundhog's Day, over and over and over again, you know. Now we're running into times where people are running out of leave if they're still able to work or work from home. We had, you know, different leave banks that were created and extensions that were made for people, and people are starting to run out of those things. We're still not quite understanding what this virus is, how it works, who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. Is it political? Is it not political? People don't trust each other. People are afraid to talk to each other anymore. I mean, for goodness sakes, we got to a point where it was a political statement if you were or were not wearing a mask.
Right.
You know, rather than, okay, I may or may not agree with it, but they're telling us that this is a good thing to do for myself and other people, you know. So people are stuck. They don't know what to do. There's no sense of purpose. We've heard a lot from the older teens, I would say. You know, I think one of the things that makes me really sad is that while there's a lot of things that are breaking up and experiences that are lost, there are some events in our lives that are just not replaceable. And for a lot of us, we'll be able to work and, you know, we'll be able to do different things. But, you know, I'm never going to be the quarterback on the high school football team again my senior year. You know, I'm never going to be, you know, be able to have prom again. Even SATs, you know, my junior, we're talking about that, you know, experience of studying for colleges or going to college fairs and, you know, what are you even going to do? I don't even know what to do because we don't know what they're going to look like next year. So all those things that we're not going to be able to replace, but we don't know what to do with them right now. You know, Christmas is coming up. I heard something heartbreaking, a story on the news where as a mom talking about how her 10-year-old son had an understanding of what that financially things were more difficult and why they hadn't had direct conversation about it. She knew that he was understanding of that because he wasn't asking for his allowance as often as he normally would. And then her younger child, who was 6, you know, age appropriate, mom's not going to talk to him about that. I get that, but gets all excited about the fact that Christmas is coming and Santa's coming. And, you know, that's such a bright and happy thing. And then it just made me think of, man, are there children out there who are going to have that broken for them this year? You know, that fantasy, that tradition, you know, that those things aren't going to follow through. And we don't get to make that back up. We don't get to say, ooh, 2020, that was terrible. That's the year that we forgot Santa Claus, but then we got to reinstate him in 2021. It's those types of things that, you know, that's part of the human experience. That's what worries me in the long run for people. We'll get through this. We're resilient. Our kids are even more resilient than we are. But what's going to stick, you know? And we don't have a path. We don't know.
Right. Well, let's stay on this topic of kids. And Tami, what should we as parents and caregivers be focused on right now? I mean, what's the most important thing for our kids? And what should we be, you know, tuned into with our little ones and our teenagers?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tina, for that. Just reminding us that we are losing some of those amazing childhood experiences, and that we will experience some grief around that. We will experience loss around some of these things that are just normal in our life. And so just recognizing that. But I encourage our parents who may be struggling with all the things that are coming at them, all the stress, is to really take their emotional temperature. Really take their emotional temperature. And what I mean by that is strong emotions. One of the things that I like to share with children is emotions are like ocean waves. They come and they go. Some are strong and scary and feel like they will topple us over. And some are calm and fun to be in, right? And I often share that analogy or that story with parents so that they understand that, you know, riding that wave with a child is probably not a great idea, but being able to take our own emotional temperature and asking ourselves daily, what is that strong emotion that's about to topple me over? What's that strong emotion that's coming at me? And kind of going through the process of when I become aware of that feeling, what is something I can do? And I'm afraid self-care has become cliche, but it needs to be intentional. And if we can just become self-aware and acknowledge that we may not be able to, perfectly deal with all the stress and anxiety that's coming our way, but also know that if we can just become aware and let our children understand that those emotions are strong and they will come and go and that we're here, children actually calm down when they are able to kind of see us in that mode of vulnerability, yes, but also the mode of, yeah, I'm experiencing emotion too. And that is okay. And I also just want to give the wisdom and the words of Winnie the Pooh. All right. So I'm going to read it so I get it right. Okay. Because I don't want to mess it up. But Winnie the Pooh says, promise me this. And this is directly to any parent that's listening or anyone who's struggling with anxiety. Promise me this. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you've seen, and smarter than you think. The wisdom words of Winnie the Pooh. We need to surround ourselves with those kinds of affirmations because we are stronger than we think and smarter than we believe, and all of those things that encompass that. But we don't often acknowledge that within these moments of anxiety. And finally, I would say understanding that chronic stress creates that alarm system going off in us all the time. And so we become hyper alert to lots of different things coming at us, and our reactions tend to be a little stronger than if we weren't in chronic stress. And just recognizing that, not beating ourselves up about it, having lots of self-compassion, but knowing that it's there, and just being very present with our children and mirroring those things that we want them to be able to do for themselves is so important. I think parents are so afraid of learning loss. That is one of the greatest things we can teach them at this moment. How to recognize those feelings and being able to manage those feelings in a healthy way is really, that's incredible learning. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the words from Winnie the Pooh, Tami. Very grounding. Thank you.
Good, good.
Dr. Boyd, what is your advice to parents, but also caregivers? Some of us are taking care of elderly parents and others, and feeling that pressure and the isolation too that comes with that. So what can they keep in mind? What can be helpful to them?
Oh, that's a great question. I want to back up just a moment because I think that there's also a point to be made about the idea that the cavalry's coming, right? And that we're sort of in this place where we're kind of waiting for the relief. And I kind of want to just highlight the idea that that's not always been true for certain communities. And so we're sort of situated in a different place where we don't always expect it to be a straight line, and we don't always expect that we can call the police and the police will come, or that when we have a problem in our neighborhood, it will be addressed in a way where people are treated humanely and equitably. And so it does create a lot of stress, but there's been people who have been living in circumstances where they don't necessarily trust that the cavalry's coming and that they're going to have relief. And so I see different levels of distress in my patients around that very issue. Like I was working with one patient, and there was a lot of distress about, the civil unrest and the people in the streets. And they said, when I call the police come. And now when I call the police are not going to come. And I said, don't worry, sweetie. I haven't called the police in 25 years. You're going to be okay. And so just an acknowledgement here. I want to kind of give space to the other side of this. There's many sides of this, but to different perspective where many of us are situated in a world where we don't expect a straight line or an outcome, or if we do the right thing, we'll get the outcome we want right away, and we're behaving and it's frustrating because other people won't behave, and we're used to getting what we think we deserve when we behave. And there's lots of people who are doing the right thing and we're sort of on our own here, right? And that's long history of that in different communities, and those are the communities I serve. And so I just think it's important to recognize that there's a different level of us who are actually a little more well situated for the cavalry not coming, understanding like, oh, we're in this by ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on the system to uphold justice for us or see us or come to our aid or come running. And so I really appreciate the fear and the anxiety that produces for people who are accustomed to that. But I also just want to share the perspective that there's many of us who are not accustomed to that, and we've been kind of making do a long time, and we're still kind of making do. And our communities are getting hit the hardest with COVID, and we're still trying to make do, right? And people are arguing about the politicalization of masks. And so I just think it's important to understand that not all communities have that sense of relief or that sense of hope that this is going to change around the corner because, we'll be seen or heard or cared for in an equitable way. So thank you for allowing me to make that point. I think it's really important.
Of course, it's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. I also, the caregiving, it's a challenging, again, it's like, I think a lot of us are doing more caregiving and more school educating than we used to do. And so I think being kind and compassionate with the self is really important. Like, what they say, put your mask on first before you put the mask on of others. And it's okay to be worn out. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to be honest with yourself about that. It's okay to reach out to other support systems to see if they can help you with the tangible care that needs to be given. And to be honest with yourself, because again, we're all sort of in this together, and we're all kind of modeling this thing. And so it's hard. Caregiving is a hard job. Caregiving for little ones is hard. Caregiving for elders is hard. Caregiving for people who, are adult age that need support is hard. And it was already hard. And now we take this pandemic and we set it on fire. And so I just want to say to everybody, it's challenging. Keep up the great work. Take deep breaths. Be honest with yourself. And supportive statements. I mean, everyone I love what you were saying, Tami, that it's so cliche to say self-care. It's almost become like a garbage term. Self-care, self-care, self-care. It's like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, a pedicure. What I believe self-care, a massage, none of the things we can do now anyway. But what it really means to me is self-supportive talk. You got this, you're doing a great job, you had a hard day, that's okay, I love you. I talk to myself so sweetly. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. You should hear the party. It took a lot of practice to get there, but I love you, Briana. You're doing a great job. That was hard. That session was really hard. And you did the best you could, and it looked like a disaster, and that's the best you got today, and I love you, right? Instead of coming out of these caretaking exchanges that are challenging and maybe losing your patience and then leaving there and just beating yourself. You screwed up. You're so terrible. You're so worthless. Look at you. I mean, it's like, listen, if you can learn like anything that I have to say today, walk away with like, just really show up on your own team right now. Like really, we are living in unprecedented times. And if you're okay, like if you're just like crushing it right now, awesome. If you're like totally crushing it all the time right now, I'm like, are you really okay? Are you really okay? Because I don't think any of us are hitting like the high level performance all the time right now. And so if we can give ourselves some grace, some kindness, some compassion, some self-supportive statements, I think that's much better than the critical eye where we're scrutinizing, very human, common, shortcomings, mistakes, things that ways we're not really perfect right now.
Show up on your own team. That's what you said, right?
Absolutely.
Show up on your own team. I love that.
Rah, sis, boom, bah, that girl. Like, let's hear it. Like, let's hear it, right? I'll have my patients just put their hand on their heart, say, I love you, just to send themselves some love and some support instead of you screwed that up. This is never going to get better. It's always, imagine a friend that you call on the phone and she says, oh, this is bad. This is awful. This is terrible. You really screwed up. You wouldn't call her back. And
right.
So we want to hang up the phone on that voice inside of us as well. That's like, maybe I'll call the other friend, I'll talk to her about this, and because it feels better. And so I think practicing. Yeah.
I sometimes have to check myself and ask myself, is that how I would talk to a colleague or someone or a friend of mine? No. So why am I talking to myself like that? So,
we are actually meaner to people. We are meaner to ourselves than people we actively dislike.
Right.
We say things to ourselves that we would never say to that person that's making us crazy in the office.
Right.
And that's really important for us to consider. Like, why would we do that? If we wouldn't say it to somebody who we think is deserving of that kind of language, why would we bring that home? And then we can't get away from that. We can't leave the office and get away from that person that's bothering us. And we become our own greatest stressor. And we've already got so many layers of stress. Maybe we can peel ourselves off the top here, lighten the load a little.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So we've gotten a couple questions from our viewers about accessing mental health support. And so we're going to launch another poll just to see where everybody's at. Kim's going to launch that now. And our question is, do you know how to find mental health support? With the answers being, yes, I have resources I can access, or I'm not sure, or no, I don't know where to look. So let's tackle that one. We've got a question here from Patricia Thompson. She's asking, is there some sort of centralized resource for some of these mental health, community, and wellness spaces? If so, where is it located?
211 is a really good resource in San Diego County for a much more kind of global kind of connection to things. It's available online and people can call, and they do have access to a lot of the community-based programs, that kind of stuff.
You said 211, right, Tina?
211, yeah, like 911, right. But 211.
Right.
Mental health services, this is a tough one right now, just like with medicine in general. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of medicine that's not practicing medicine right now. A lot of my conversations with friends, family members, and clients is, hey, let's not forget that there's other things happening here that need to be attended to. I do worry about cancer diagnoses that are not getting caught, and people with chronic health conditions that are waiting for medicines and all that. And that's from the physical health side. The mental health side, it's been tricky. We've had a couple instances where we've had people in severe distress where it has been like jumping through hoops to find facilities that will take. I remember one point calling around all day long, early in the morning, basically saying, we will pay cash, we'll pay cash to get this person seen, not trying to go through insurance or anything else, because we're that desperate. And it was early on in the pandemic and nobody was seeing anybody in person. And while I've been doing telehealth since 2009, and I think it's a fantastic resource for us, it doesn't fit everything and every need. So it has been difficult. And I'll admit, I was very frustrated in the beginning when I would listen to some of our community leaders talk about how, oh no, mental health, when we first went on the lockdown, I've become very concerned about the rates of suicide increasing, which we've seen happen. Domestic violence has increased, alcohol and other drug use. I think in California, last time I had looked, the statistic was something like 66% increase in alcohol sales. That was all going to lead to something. And what we would hear is like, oh, no, we have plenty of services. Now, for the rest of my panelists here, I think you're probably familiar with the fact that it's not that easy. It's not that easy to find a therapist for for a kid on Medi-Cal. It is not that easy to find those resources, and that was in good times. So it is hard, but I don't want to discourage people from looking, because, I was with one of our departments yesterday after an incident, and, I told everybody, you're never alone, even though it really feels like it, and so there are resources out there. I'm imagining that a lot of people that are participating in this webinar or listening today likely are working and have some kind of a job, employment. And so EAPs and health insurance are available. You have to be a hard advocate for yourself, though. You got to ask the questions, you got to make the phone calls, you got to call them back. Churches and other faith-based groups often have a counseling arm. And even a throw out to them is that sometimes, people are afraid to engage in something that comes from an organization that might be faith-based, because maybe that's not their fit. But research that out, check it out a little bit, because sometimes, even though that's who supports them, that doesn't mean that that's their mission. Their mission is not to evangelize you or, or recruit you. And sometimes they have really good professionals and peers that are involved in that. So you quoted Winnie the Pooh, Tami. I'm thinking of Mr. Rogers when he says, in difficult times, look for the helpers. And imagine that the helpers can come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And so when mental health comes into mind, sure, there's people like us that are licensed clinicians, but there are peer support, there are chaplains, there are groups, support groups in other ways too. There's a lot of good stuff online. CDC has a great website or webpage about mental health. That's all about mental health. So if you go onto the CDC and look up mental health, and it links to a lot of different ones. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, another good one that has those. Don't be afraid to look at things like from the PTSD National Center for PTSD, even though a lot of it is about veterans and other specific groups. I mean, we're all human. We all have common reactions to these things. And so you can look there and glean some information. It might not be an apple to apple, but it might be an apple to an orange. And then you're like, okay, then I'm informed. So I'm trying to think of other ones that I know off the top of my head. I want to get on my computer and start looking.
And start Googling for us.
Yeah, here's a good one. Here's a good one.
Tami and Dr. Boyd, do you have any others to add to Tina's list of resources?
I do. Tina, that was so exhaustive. I really appreciate that. I might be calling you.
Right.
I am in private practice and a little bit isolated in that regard. And I would say that one very more specific way to talk about how to secure resources, it's not easy. So if you're struggling in the community, just know there's nothing wrong with you. This should be easier. It's really unfortunate. And it's so hard because when we start to really seek these services out, it's usually when things aren't going well. So we don't have the level of resources internally that we once had. And then we have to do this sort of go on this mission. And even our mental health providers in the community are like, well, this is a good question, because this is a hard thing to do. And so what I like to tell my patients, people who do still have insurance, this one's for you. It's good to go to if you want to use insurance, which is a great thing to do, go to your insurance websites first, start there. Mm-hmm. And usually there's some kind of filtered search and you can put in like what kind of specialty or, what kind of condition you're looking to treat. And you can even sometimes put in like a mile radius from your home, and you can put in a preference for a gender or non-binary provider and the kinds of things you're looking to treat, the age range, and then it will populate a list for you that really fits your specific criteria. And all the people on that list take your insurance. It's so daunting when you have a particular insurance and you get a good referral from somebody and you call, they don't take your insurance. You call somebody else, they don't take your insurance. And you're already using your limited resources to try to close this this ever closing gap before things don't look good. And it's hard to do. And so I think for a spinning our wheels sake, I think it's important if you can to start there. Psychology Today is also a really great resource because you can do some of that narrowing of a search through the search engine. And it will often put a list of the types of insurance that each provider takes if they're listed on Psychology Today. Again, that's just not 100% accurate because people have different levels or tiers, or they're the HMO but not the PPO. So I do still recommend starting with your own insurance if you have it, and then maybe from there moving to Psychology Today. And also the last little plug I want to make is to be sure that you don't put it off. Like it's hard to find services. It may take longer than you think, and people are full. Like I'm not taking any new patients until February because I'm full. Mm-hmm. And I've been working more than ever. I'm squeezing people in on days I didn't typically work, trying to kind of meet the need, and the need is so great. And so if you're starting to feel something, or you're starting to sort of smell something churning in your partner or your children, I wouldn't wait until it full on blossoms before you start kind of poking around to see the supports that are going to be available to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Tami put some resources, and so did Tina, in the chat for those of you on Zoom. And Kim, can you cut and paste those for the folks on Facebook, please? And if you could pull up the results from the poll to see. Okay, people are pretty good on resources that they can access. Some of those folks not quite sure, so hopefully we cleared some things up. And we're running out of time, and it's time for us to close, but this is such a great conversation. And before we close, our lead community is a group of really action-oriented people. So at the end of all of our webinars, we ask our guests, our panelists, what is one thing that you would have us do when we leave this webinar? So what is your direction for us when we leave today? And can we start with you, Tami?
That is a great question and a huge question. I really want to highlight that we really need to be using a lot of self-compassion right now. We don't have all the answers. We don't know all of the long-term effects that this will have on society and our communities. We will be grieving some things that come our way that feel like we've lost. Holidays coming up, parties, those sorts of things. We will grieve those things, but we will also get through this. There is hope. And I do want to say that that please reach out to your schools if you are struggling with any children, any issues that your child is presenting. I did notice in the chat that there was a concern about not being able to trust high school counselors, and that really breaks my heart. We are trained in mental health, and we are trained to help support mental health crisis and supporting kids with mental health issues. And so I would say if you don't have the one counselor that you can trust, please don't stop there. Go ahead and continue. And so I don't have one thing to leave with, just hoping that you feel inspired and you feel hopeful that we are in this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Tami. Tina.
I just read one of the questions too. So I wanted to say something about, like, one of the people asked about how do we create a future when we're not really looking towards the past's not going to be there anymore. And to chaos and change creates anxiety, no matter what. If it's a good change or a bad change, it's going to create some anxiety. And so to know that the discomfort sometimes is necessary for us to find our new thing. And it's scary because we don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, I certainly hope that we come back to a space where we can freely walk around showing our faces and smiling at each other and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But, you know, perspective is so important. And so even though things feel dark and desperate and like they're heading in a direction that just doesn't feel right, is to know that you do have a voice, even when we don't feel like we do. We can still have action. It might not be as big and grand as maybe perhaps we'd like to, but little actions can make a difference. And so you can still have purpose and you can still have direction. And so I have a challenge actually, is kind of more from that. My challenge would be to find somebody in the course of your day, and maybe every day, I would love this, that's not maybe known to you, or somebody that's outside of your normal kind of circle of connection, and send them a card, give them a token, you know, be it the barista at the coffee shop. You know, I know her name is Tami. I'm going to use Tami as an example. Send a card. Hey, Tami, your smile today really made my day. Thanks. Just do those little reach outs to people. There's a lot of people, there's been a lot of those Zoom happy hours and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of people that aren't participating in that. And so my challenge is to reach out outside of your normal and just try to make a gentle touch to somebody, because that can make a huge difference. Presence is the most protective thing that we have with each other.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Tina. It's almost like reconstructing that community that came together in the beginning, right? In little bits. Dr. Boyd, what is the one thing you would have us do?
I'm self-love. I mean, just self-love, self-compassion, self-patience, taking breaks. I'm taking a break. I'm modeling taking breaks. If anyone's inspired by watching this to take a break, I encourage it very much so. But yeah, and the more we have loving space for ourselves, the more we actually seem to have more compassion and loving space for others. The more I'm able to accept myself, love myself, be with myself as I am in this space, the more I'm able to tolerate other people, love them, tolerate their imperfections, and just, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel the feelings, you know. So I would say self-love, and if I could tag one more in there, it's give yourself the space to feel the feelings. The fastest way to move through an uncomfortable feeling is to allow it, you know, not to push it off. And you get in this weird tense, like, oh, no. And you're spending a lot of energy fighting off this thing that if you just let it come, it will overwhelm you and it will roll right off of you, right? Not every one feeling you've ever had, like Tami said, they come and they go. And we spend a lot of time making judgments about certain emotions and then walling ourselves off from them. But we are here and very capable of feeling all of them. And so get out of your own way. You know, it's like a little roller coaster when it's going to the top and you're like, oh, this is scary. Oh, this is bad. Oh, this is bad. And then you get to the top and it's almost like we stop ourselves right there. Like, no. It's like, let it come down. Just give yourself the space, right? So give yourself the space to cry. Give yourself the space to scream. The more you give yourself the space, the faster you'll actually be able to wrap yourself back up, which is not the point. But if that is your point, that's the fastest way to get there. So self-love and just letting yourself feel what's there.
Those are all great. Thank you so much for being here, Briana Boyd, Tina Casola, and Tami Johnson. And mostly thank you for the great care that you are providing to us in the community. Thank you for your leadership and thank you for your care. To all of you who joined by Zoom and through the 10 News live stream, thank you for being here. And on behalf of Lead San Diego, I wish you all well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Well.